Hello, this is Dr. Anthony Delmond. We've been going through some closing basics, and we're at the stage now where we're ready to start talking about the specific closing techniques that you can use. As I said, we're not going to go through all of them here, but we'll go through a good number, but you can certainly go out and find some additional ones on your own. There are some different ones that are discussed in your textbook, but we're going to go through a few here that I think are particularly important because they're very commonly used. The first is the alternative choice close. This is a classic, and it asks the prospect to choose between two or more options. So for example, would you like the 2032R or the 2038R? Two options that are available. They might be very close, but instead of asking the customer whether or not they're going to purchase the product, you're asking them which one they're going to buy. So you're assuming right off the bat that they're going to make a purchase, and you're just allowing them to choose between the two options. This is really useful because it doesn't give the customer the choice to say, no, I don't want to buy. Some people may feel that this is a little bit manipulative, but we're expecting salespeople to try and sell us things as customers. So it makes sense that their method for closing is not going to give us a lot of options. It's not to say you can't say no as a customer, but it's assuming that you won't. The next one is the assumptive close. Again, this one assumes that the prospect is going to make a purchase, but in this case, you're going to just say something like, I'll go ahead and get the order form filled out for your 2038 model. Again, you're assuming that they're going to make the purchase, but you're not giving them a choice between options. You're just making the decision for them. They can always say no, but people have a harder time saying no when you've already made the decision. A lot of times people are just concerned about taking that leap themselves. A prospect doesn't really want to opt out. This really only works if the buyer is really ready to make a purchase, but they're afraid to make that leap. There are times when this works well and times when it doesn't. It is harder to sell a very complex product using this type of close. If you're selling something cheap where the risk isn't very high, this is a better close opportunity. We'll walk through some of the specific reasons or places where this will work later on in this lecture. The next closing technique is a compliment close. This is going to appeal to your customers' maybe sense of pride, sense of self-worth, because you're going to tell them that they are making a wise decision. For example, you've really made some great choices on your land, and this product fits right in with your excellent judgment. Can I fill the order today? I like this little graphic because a compliment close is not really just telling somebody, wow, I like your tie. Why don't you buy this product? It's really more of praising their decision-making process, praising what they do, and treating them with a lot of respect, a lot of reverence to make them feel confident in making a decision. This works well for very egotistical customers. It also works well for somebody who's wavering on their self-confidence and you're building them up. I should say here, before I get too much further into this closing techniques section, you do want to make sure before you close that you feel that the product is a good fit for your customer. If you don't feel that the customer should buy this product, don't try and sell it to them because it's going to hurt you down the road. It's going to hurt your reputation, and it's going to peg you as a salesperson who doesn't care about their clients. The next closing technique we want to talk about is the summary benefits close. This is a great one if you use it correctly. In this closing technique, you're going to list all the benefits that seemed to interest the customer during your presentation, obviously glossing over the ones that didn't interest them, and you're going to determine the key product benefits. You're going to summarize those benefits. You're only going to talk about the benefits, then you're not going to talk about features. You're not going to talk about advantages. You're just going to talk about the benefits that they were interested in. You like the fact that this saved you money. You like the fact that this lowered your transportation costs, helped your workers, and so on. And then you're going to make a proposal. Here's what I think you should do. You're acting kind of like a consultant, but you're going through and making sure that they remember all those things that were important to them along the way. This can be really useful because you're reminding them of all the gains they'll have from buying this product. A continuous yes close is fairly similar. You're still going to be outlining the benefits. You might be outlining some of the other pieces too, maybe some of the features. But a continuous yes close is where you're asking the client a bunch of questions to which they answer yes. So you need to make sure you know what they liked. You need to make sure you know that you're going to get all positive responses. Do you like to save money? Do you want your workers to be happy? Do you like moving forward with your business? Once they've said yes a bunch of times, then you ask them do you want to buy? It's an inertia sort of a close because they're getting excited. They're putting a string of positive responses together, and then when you get to the close, they're already in a positive frame of mind. It's all about framing. Again, related to this is the minor points close. This is going to focus on some minor product features to sell the product. So you might let them choose between a few different things. Do you like the green or the blue model? Did you want the weather stripping or the upgraded seats? Did you have any interest in an internal cab? Anything like that where they're going to be able to make some minor adjustments before they purchase it. They're going to be focused then on all those things that they wanted out of this. And then eventually, once they've made enough of those small adjustments, it seems like an easy decision. They've already gone through all the work of putting this customizable product together for themselves. Obviously, they're going to be ready to buy it. Some of these closing techniques are more risky than others. The Benjamin Franklin close, or the T account close, asks the prospects to consider pros and cons before purchasing the product. There are a lot of variations on this. One risk, obviously, is that if you're asking the prospect to list the pros and cons and they get a lot more cons than pros, you're going to lose that sale. So you want to make sure that you know that they're going to have a larger pro list than con list. Sometimes you can, instead of asking the prospect to write it down themselves, a salesperson can have them verbally list it, just orally list it. That can be useful. The salesperson can list it out for themselves, basing that on what the prospect has said along the way. Or in a modified T account close, the salesperson can ask the prospect to mention all the pros for making the purchase, ignoring the cons altogether. This is better a lot of the time because they already know what the cons are. Reminding them about the things they don't like about a product is not necessarily a recipe for sales success. If they're only thinking about the positive things, then you have that same positive inertia as you would get in the continuous yes close. If we go to something that's a little bit more pushy, you get to the standing room only close. This is where the customer is given this sort of immediacy, this sense of immediacy, where the options are limited. Maybe there's only so many of this product left, so they have to make a decision today to avoid missing out. Again, some customers feel manipulated with this approach. You don't want to use this unless you can verify it. If the customer comes back the next day and there's the same amount, then you don't seem like you're being very authentic. So use this one sparingly and only when you know that it's going to be successful. The probability close is where you're asking the client to share their probabilities about making a purchase today. If you ask them what's the likelihood that you'll buy and they say that they're 85% certain or more, then they're probably going to buy the product today. Good rule of thumb, 85%. With prospects between 50 and 85%, they may have some objections. You need to make sure you can address those. And if the prospect is less than 50% sure, she's really unlikely to buy the product, and you should consider getting out of there because you're spinning your wheels. And maybe that's the time to use a soft close where you just tell them you'd like to come back, or they can reach out to you when they're ready to make that decision. A negotiation close is where you offer a compromise, a way for both you and the prospect to reach a win-win situation. Now, you might have to give up some, the prospect might have to give up some. Neither of you is going to be perfectly satisfied, but you're going to potentially make a sale this way. An example here that I've got is, I recognize that you're interested in the top of the line model, but that doesn't seem to fit your budget. What if we drop down to the next tier and I offered you a one-day only discount of 5%? You're still doing that sort of standing room only thing where you're offering them a short-term limited option, but you're also helping them work through some of their issues. You're not going to make the commission on the high top of the line model, but you're going to probably make a sale, and they're going to get a discount, save a little bit of money, and get something that isn't the best, but it'll satisfy their needs. This is really useful, especially when a product has a lot of features to choose from. We talked about before that placement when you are selling a product, you're usually starting with the highest tier. You're showing them the best options, and customers feel bad when they have to move down and get something a little lower. So offering them something is a good way to sort of compensate for that loss. All right, so situation-specific closing techniques, there's tons of different things you could do, but when a customer's really indecisive, they can't make a decision, sometimes it's useful to give them alternatives, provide a summary of benefits or a continuous yes, so you're getting that inertia, that positive sense. You could have them do a T account, maybe a modified T account with more of the pros side, so they're not still weighing everything out. They're already indecisive. Standing room only is a little pushy, but it can be useful if somebody's having a hard time making a decision. And negotiation also is useful, but these kind of force a decision and make it easier for your customer to lock onto something. If your customer is egotistical or an expert on their own, or they feel like an expert, maybe they're pushy and unfriendly, a compliment close might work, praising their ability to make decisions. Again, T account, if they feel like they're able to make a decision better than they would be with you, T account or probability or even negotiation might work really well. They don't need the continuous yes, they don't need to feel manipulated. If the customer is hostile, compliment can work. A continuous yes, getting that positive inertia going, could work. It's harder to sell when a customer is particularly hostile. When a customer is a friend, you can take care of some small things for them. Negotiation and probability are great. Obviously, you want to be able to give discounts to your friend if you have those available, but you need to make sure you're working within the company's guidelines. You can assume they're going to make a purchase, but you don't want to undercut that friendship by using standing room only or T account, maybe a T account, but assumptive is usually the best route to go, or a negotiation. If the customer has predetermined beliefs, they're very set in their ways, maybe they have a concern about a source, we talked about objections, then you want to make sure that they understand the benefits outweigh their concerns, their previously existing beliefs. So you might use a summary of benefits close if you feel like that would work, but a T account's usually a good route to go. If the customer's greedy and just wants a deal, well then obviously you're going to have to work on giving them a deal. Standing room only is great because you can say for a limited time only, here's what the option is. You could also go with a negotiation where you're offering them something for a lower option. That's a good place to stop. When we come back, we'll talk about some tips for closing.